think that's a very interesting question. And then Talisha Mills, she testified, Mark was ducking down when shot in the head with the bullet. That's how we know how Mark Edwards died. He was ducking down, just like she said, and just like Joe Slemko said. The bullet came through his forehead and went out the back to create that spatter pattern. And there's another law, in this case, that causes me some concern. Another jurisdiction is a felony firearm. Reginald Burks is charged with a separate crime of possessing a firearm at the time he committed the crime of second-degree murder and voluntary manslaughter. To prove this charge, the prosecutor must prove each of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that Reginald Burks committed the crime of second-degree murder or voluntary manslaughter, which has been defined for you. Okay, so he has to prove that part to you, in which we know he hasn't. Because we, in fact, even though we don't have a burden of proof, I think we've essentially proven to you that Reginald is actually innocent. But this next line is a bit confusing, and some laws are even confusing to me. And I've been a lawyer for about 14 years now. It is not necessary, however, that Reginald Burks be convicted of that crime. And that is the part that is a little confusing. It almost seems like a compromise. That, hey, you know, something happened here, but you're innocent of it, but you were out there that day with the gun. It's like saying that your son could be charged with possessing a gun at school, but he never had a gun at school. Or be suspended for it. He never had a gun at school. The gun was actually at home. And it wasn't even his gun. It was a hunting rifle that belonged to his father. But the rules of the school say, hey, we can suspend you, kick you out of school, and charge you with carrying a gun. It's illogical. And so when you are back there checking off your jury boxes, please, after you check that he's not guilty of murder or second-degree murder or manslaughter, please check not guilty. Because he is innocent of both charges. Now, when I sit down, the prosecutor gets to go again. And he probably will make some new arguments that I haven't heard before. That would be a strategy move. He might try to argue that there was 7 bullets left in one of the cartridges that goes into the gun. Because that's what Brent Sloja says in his report. But isn't it interesting how he never asked Reginald when he's up there, when's the last time you were at the range? Or how many bullets were in that cartridge when you went out there on that night? Because he wants to insinuate, or he wants you to guess is what he wants you to do. Because there is no evidence of it. Just like he wants to insinuate with Joe Slemko that some knit cap existed when not one witness testified to it. Because when he was asking those questions, I'm like, knit cap? What knit cap are you talking about? Because nobody's testified to one. And so he might make these new arguments. And the funny thing is, I bet, because you didn't hear Detective Hampton testify about how he inventoried the gun and counted the number of bullets in the cartridge. Because wouldn't that be the responsible thing to do? But I bet they've never even checked those bullets in that cartridge. Because if they did, I think they'd find out. They look very different than the bullet that Raquel Wright supposedly got from her mechanic that went through the license plate and she dug out of a seat. But when he makes those new arguments, I don't get a chance to get back up here and argue back. But you know that, in fact, Reginald's innocent. Why is this case? This case, this stuff here, it's not the police officer's responsibility. It's not Hampton's fault that none of this was done. Because Hampton's just a police officer. Who does he take his directions from? Do you think he just some light went on his head and he decided to go interview Gerald Corbin some 6 months after the incident? The only alleged independent eyewitness of the shooting? Of course not. This man told him to go. And we wouldn't even know about that because there was no report, because that's how Hampton rolls. He doesn't make a report if a person tells him something that shows that Reg is innocent. And so, this investigation, it's not the detective's fault. This is how they've been doing it in the Detroit Police Department. This is the status quo. And the only reason why it's the status quo is because of this man right here. He has a responsibility to make sure, especially in a homicide case, that the police do a thorough investigation. And he did not handle his responsibility. Instead of looking for the truth, he's done everything he could possibly do in his power to block the truth, to muddy the waters, to confuse the truth. He is not interested in the truth. Why is he interested in the truth? Because then he would have to admit, if he could be interested in the truth, that in fact, a second innocent person has been charged in this murder. And that the real murderers, which is one of these people here, or it could be somebody else, we don't know, because the only reason why we get these people here, the only testimony that puts these people in the different vans is their own testimony. Nobody else. And how do we know that that can't be believed? Because who they are. Lying is part of who they are. And the prosecutor knows it. He talked to these people. You don't think he can say, oh, I didn't talk to them. I didn't know they were going to be lying, complete lies. Of course he did. How do we know he talked to people? Look at Stephanie Lomax. He tried to say to Stephanie Lomax to discredit her because she speaks the truth. To discredit her, say, oh, you were taking some medication that night. Could that have affected, some medication, some heart medication? But I asked her, the medication didn't affect her ability to see and hear what was going on. She didn't come to court and guess. She came to court and told the truth. But that's what his game is. It's not about the truth. It's about winning. It doesn't matter how many innocent lives are destroyed. That's why. And there's only one person that can hold this man accountable. Because clearly it's not his superiors. He's been here doing this a long time. The only people that can hold him accountable are you. And you can't deliver Reginald Burke's justice today. You can only put him on the path to justice, to getting a new life, to appreciating a life that he had that was taken from him by these people right here. And he could start to live his life that he was meant to live. The gift that he got called life. He can begin to live it starting today, hopefully. Sometime before the end of this day, his new life will begin. And that's who's responsible. And it's not just this verdict. And it's not just telling him that they were wrong. It's also about you telling everybody you know about what you witnessed today. Because you are all witnesses to this injustice. And it will continue, and it will perpetuate itself. Like it has been doing for years. If people do not talk, if people do not tell what they know, one person can change everything. We know that from history. One person. And each one of you are an individual. And each one of you tells everybody you know. If you go on Facebook and share to everybody you know the injustice that was done to this man for no reason, except he tried to save his brother's life and saved his life. And this man who saved the life of Christopher Bohannon, then maybe change can start in the city of Detroit. And now there might be some accountability in the city of Detroit. Had I known how these police officers operated, I would have been more prepared. Had I known how this man operated, I would have been more prepared for him. But I didn't know. But now I do. And you know what? Experience matters. And I learned that firsthand. And it's not just Reginald Burks who's had unique experiences in the last 8 months. I too have had unique experiences. This is the only case I've ever had in my entire life where, as I got closer to the truth, I started to become afraid. Because when I finally did discover the truth on that second day of trial, I knew that one of these people here, or somebody that was with them, was actually the person that killed Mark Edwards. And when I knew that these people here, they're criminals. They use guns. And from the testimony of Eric Lomax and Mike Stewart, they freely use them. They're not afraid if somebody sees them with a gun. They do whatever they want. That is how they live. And as I got closer to the truth, I started to become afraid. That in fact, maybe one of them will prevent me from getting to the truth. Maybe one of them, because I don't have a gun, might decide to look me up and come and kill me. But I am still afraid of that. Because if the police start to reinvestigate, when the truth comes out, and it's come out in this courtroom, and unfortunately sometimes it takes a trial to find the truth. But when it comes out, hopefully they will do a proper investigation now that they know the truth. But a person once said, a coward dies 1,000 deaths, but a brave man only one. And if in fact that happens, well, it happens. But that's not going to change what I do or the cases I take. Because how could I talk to Reginald and hear what had happened and learn the facts and dig into the truth and be afraid to help? How could I live with myself if I turned my back on this man? Reg has been my responsibility. And while he's been my responsibility, he's become my friend. And not just my friend, but a friend of all the people I work with, and even other people that I know. Because I've never met a man like this in my entire life. To sit here and listen and be strong every day, and listen to the lies that people are telling, and listen to the government try to perpetuate those lies. The government that we all trust, because we grow up trusting the police and trusting the government. But knowing that they turned his back on him and they betrayed him. And yet, he gets up every day, because I know that many times I have trouble sleeping during this case. And the fact that he gets up every day and still takes care of his family and still does the things that he has to do, in spite of this living nightmare called the people versus Reginald Burks. And so in a moment, I'm going to have to sit down because my time is up. But we know the truth. Now, and once you see the truth, you can no longer close your eyes and pretend you didn't see it. And the truth is that Reginald Burks is innocent. And I wish there was a little box on the verdict form where you could say, innocent, instead of not guilty. Because what does not guilty do? Well, these people over here can say, oh, well, we still had this great case. Just that reasonable doubt saved that Reginald Burks. We know that's not the truth. We know the truth is Reg is innocent. And he deserves to go home. And it's not just Reg's life. As you learned, it's a whole generation of Burks that are on the line here. And he deserves to go home today. And when you're back there deliberating, which I missed.
1 hour.
I know. So.
No, that's good.
Yeah, but I missed how to deliberate, start with this. So.
That's
inconsequential.
I mean, it is. That was a fucking powerful ass closing. I mean,
Yeah.
just like you always say, don't sweat the shit you missed.
It's an hour and 29 seconds, to be exact.
There's a couple of parts that I was confused.
Okay,
too.
so
Yeah,
tell
let's-
us. Tell me now.
The felony firearm, and then when you were talking about, like, before he goes to the police station, you said he went to his mother's house, and then you said he talked to the police, and then he went to the police station, so he talked to the police on the phone.
No, at the house.
At the house.
The
At the
police
mother's house.
were physically at the mother's
Yeah.
house?
Yeah.
Oh.
And you knew that it went back.
Oh.
You're not gonna use the picture of Jerry Spence, the whole argument of how
Well,
Joe
if I can remember.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
there's some
I-
stuff that you left out, but
Yeah.
I don't wanna sit
Stuff that
here-
you left out or no?
Well,
I mean, I think the closing was
He
great,
said-
I'm just
yeah.
saying, do you want us to go over the little things?
we'll let Bill do his felony firearms since
Okay.
he's geeked
Yeah.
for it.
So one of my other concerns in this case is that there's another charge against Reg called felony firearm. And what felony firearm is it's a law that was passed that says that it's a separate crime to use a gun when you're committing another felony. So if you're drunk driving and have a gun, that means if you're a third offender drunk driver, that's a felony. And if you're drunk driving and you have a gun, you're in possession of a gun, this is a separate crime that's tacked on. And so in this case, there's no question that if Reginald did commit a crime here, he did it while possessing a firearm. But the thing that concerns me is here. And what it says is, to prove this charge, the prosecutor must prove each of the following evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that Reginald Burks committed the crime of second-degree murder or voluntary manslaughter, which has been defined for you. And that makes sense. That up here, if he did commit one of those crimes, then of course he's also guilty of felony firearm. But the piece that doesn't make sense, and I don't know why this is in the law, is that it is not necessary, however, that Reginald Burks be convicted of that crime. And every time I read that, I think, if the prosecutor proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed the crime of second-degree murder or voluntary manslaughter, then of course he'd have to be guilty of those. But this law seems to be saying that you could say, well, the prosecutor proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he's guilty of second-degree murder, but I'm not going to find him guilty of that. But I am going to find him guilty of felony firearm. What's this really about? This is about compromise. This is, I guess, giving juries a legal way to sit back there and say, well, man, we're not sure. And maybe there's 6 jurors who think he's guilty of second-degree murder, 6 jurors who think he's not. And so as they're haggling back and forth, someone says, hey, wait a minute. We can find him guilty of felony firearm and not guilty of either one of those. So you people who think he's guilty of the whole thing, couldn't you agree so we can get out of here just to find him guilty of felony firearm? And you people that think he's innocent, well, this isn't as big a charge. Couldn't you agree to find him guilty of that and we can compromise and go home? Because if you really follow the law, isn't that the only way that you could find him guilty of felony firearm alone? So I point that out to you because this isn't about compromise. And if you believe that the prosecutor hasn't proved the guilt on voluntary manslaughter or second-degree murder beyond a reasonable doubt, then you have to come back and find him not guilty of felony firearm too. Unless you're compromising. And there's no room for compromise.
It's better.
Was that better?
Yeah. It just seems so...
It's nonsense!
Because then it's the second that at the time Reginald Burks committed the crime, he knowingly carried or possessed a firearm. So they're saying, yeah, you could say he committed the crime, but you don't have to find him that he committed that crime.
Right.
Yeah, I think
That's what they're saying.
It
And I will tell you, there are people who are found guilty of felony firearm and not guilty. And it's gone up. This new law, because it didn't used to be like this. This option didn't used to be there, and the legislature changed it.
But wouldn't your CPL protect you from that? Like,
No, because
No.
if you committed a crime, your CPL's no
but
good.
if he didn't commit a crime,
Well, no. If he didn't commit a crime, you can't find him guilty of felony firearm. But what this is saying is that somehow you can find that beyond a reasonable doubt he committed second-degree murder, but we're not going to convict him of that. It's
okay, I get what you're saying.
It's horribly written.
it's intentionally
it
written
doesn't
like this.
I mean, it just...
It didn't use. I'm serious. It did not used to be like this. This is intentional.
This
They
is just
intentionally
crazy.
wrote it like this because they wanted to change what it was. Because it used to say, if you find him not guilty of whatever, you can't find him guilty of felony firearm.
Right, because the way I'm reading it, felony firearm, you have to commit a
felony
with the
Right.
firearm. If you're not guilty of committing
The
a
underlying
felony,
felony.
then how can you be guilty
And
of
that makes
committing
logical
felony
sense.
firearm?
That's how
But for
yeah.
whatever reason, they changed the law
Just recently,
to add
too.
this. Yeah, it's like a year and a half ago. Yeah, and this nonsense came in on it.
Because I mean, if people are finding beyond a reasonable doubt they met that, then there's no way they can't charge him with felony firearm, because everyone has found that the prosecutor has beyond a reasonable doubt
Prove this.
proven that.
So when they prove this, then, but what it comes down to is the reason that the Supreme Court says this is okay is because it's within the jury's rights to nullify. And that's effectively what
Okay.
happens. If you find someone guilty, if Reg was found guilty of felony firearm, but not the other two, that's clear jury nullification. The jury found that he was guilty of manslaughter or that he was guilty of second-degree murder, but even though they found that, they chose not to convict him of it. And it's their right to do that.
No, because what it says, found beyond the reasonable doubt that he committed the crime, second-degree murder, beyond the reasonable doubt. But you don't necessarily have to be convicted of that crime.
Right.
You can still get the felony firearm.
So maybe explaining, this only makes sense in the context that in a case where for whatever reason you found the prosecutor met his burden of reasonable doubt, even with the presumption of innocence, what have you, but for whatever reason you chose to not convict the person.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, so
that's the only
prosecutor
time
had
it
the
would happen.
burden,
Yep.
But we still decided not to convict
But no,
him.
but is that the reality of when it would come in?
I like the
Or is this
compromise,
compromise
yeah.
story?
Right, yeah.
Is a jury gonna go, yeah, he did it, he fucking shot him in cold blood, he just blasted away, he drove up and blasted away, but you know what? We don't feel like convicting him. Is that gonna happen?
No.
It's extreme.
No, what's gonna happen is, you're gonna have holdouts. You're gonna have somebody on each side, and they're gonna say, listen, felony firearm, you remember that instruction? Let's just all agree on that.
The,
So
prac-
we
the
go-
practical effect.
And some guy's
of
gonna
this.
go, yeah, I read in the paper, that's 2 years in prison. That's all it is. This is a life offense. But I read in the paper that felony firearm thing's just 2 years. So can't we all agree? Come on.
So the practical effect of this law
Isn't
is,
this law
is to give you the
acknowledges
jury.
and accepts jury nullification. And I wonder if somewhere down the line
Is it done?
there might be an opportunity to use this to argue about jury nullification to juries. To tell them that what this says is that you have the right, and you have the right, and you have the right as jurors to find that they prove beyond a reasonable doubt. But if you don't believe in the law, you can
Oh, I
say
love
he's
it.
not guilty of it. Because this says it right here. This gives you that right. You know? Might be-
Oh, while you're doing that, you're shooting, I just remembered, you say he shot, boom, 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 3 times, then he ducked. I think it's a little more powerful when you
that,
say
yeah.
ducking and shooting at the same
Yeah,
point
but
in
you
time.
showed
wrote
it,
that
though.
down.
Yeah, you did show
Right,
it.
but, you know.
But yeah, it's better to say it.
Yeah.
Okay,
I-
so, yeah, that's good to explain.